Hey, welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Thank you for tuning in, whatever it is that you're doing this week. I hope that you have a couple of quick wins that have been going good for you in your life, whether that's just getting more accommodated and learning more about crowdfunding or taking actually some action, setting up your Kickstarter account, getting things in order, learning about other projects. Like, you're doing amazing work just even tuning in and listening to this show. And I know how hard it is to kind of fit that and squeeze that into your schedule. I really think that today's episode is going to help you a lot. So I interviewed a creator who was able to track more than 7,000 backers on Kickstarter and raise over $385,000 for an Owlbear, I'm saying this wrong, Owlbear Plush toy. So this is insane. This is crazy, right? It's a tabletop game project, and he did an incredible job with doing this thing. You're going to learn about all of that today, essentially how he was able to launch this, get so many backers, and just really have an incredible campaign that smashed his Kickstarter goal. So that being said, hope you enjoyed today's podcast episode. To me, one of the most important parts of doing a campaign is knowing the path ahead. Knowing the path ahead makes life so much easier, right? Because you can anticipate things that are going to happen. Once you've done something one time, the reason why it gets easier the second time around is you know and can expect to a degree what is going to happen in the future. Anything in terms of, learning how to swim, for example, and then you take a break from that and then you go back and it's always a little bit easier to go swimming, or riding a bike, right? You learn it one time and then you go back the next time and it's a little bit easier. You get the hang of it, right? After a couple of minutes, it's like, okay, I remember how to do this. Once you go through the really difficult effort of learning something for the entire rest of your life, you can just go and do that thing really easily. Like, I don't even think you think about necessarily, speaking or like writing. And like when you've been out of it for a while, it's like, oh yeah, I've got to remember how to do this. Oh, okay, that's easy. Okay, there we go. Like, I got it done, right? So the hardest part is actually what you're doing right now, which is learning a new subject. But there are ways to make it easier. And I want to talk a little bit about that at the end of today's show. If this is your first time listening, so I do my podcast here. I got a YouTube channel under my name, Salvador Brigman. I also got my blog, crowdcrux.com, where you can contact me if you go there at crowdcrux.com. So got a lot of great stuff. I've written 10 books, 4 of them about crowdfunding and different topics like the Kickstarter launch formula, real estate crowdfunding explained, equity crowdfunding explained, nonprofit crowdfunding explained, nonprofit fundraising, psychological hacks, a lot of different stuff. I've also written books on blogging and podcasting, like all these different ones. So also one of my favorite books, one of my memoirs that I wrote, was actually about me being adopted and going back to El Salvador and discovering my family, my biological family there. So I've written a lot of stuff over the years, but the whole purpose behind this is to kind of just like share with you the stuff that I'm learning and discovering, particularly when it comes to crowdfunding, obviously, but also like hacks and things that I notice in my life that can help you get to your goals faster. So I hope you enjoyed today's podcast episode and you kind of take it with that lens that this is something that's difficult to learn at first, but once you get the hang of it, you can launch campaign after campaign, you can launch new products, and you never have to worry about figuring out this knowledge again. Thank you for listening to the show. My name is Sal, and it's coming up right after this. This podcast episode is sponsored by The Gadget Flow. The Gadget Flow reaches over 28 million people, and they've been around since 2012. They are Indiegogo and Kickstarter experts. They featured over 5,000 crowdfunding campaigns, and if you have a technology or design campaign, it is a great platform to generate awareness and get backers. You can check them out at thegadgetflow.com/submit and list your project today. Hey guys, welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Today I have an interesting product on the show that has already attracted more than 7,000 backers. This is for Owlbear Plush, more than 300,000 that's been raised. Really cute. I'll let the creator tell you more about it. We have him here on the show. Andreas, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Can we kind of get started? Maybe you can just describe for the listeners what is your project and your product and who is it for?
So the Owlbear Plush is a project that I've been working on for a long time and finally got around to actually getting to kickstart it. So in geek gaming culture, in Dungeons and Dragons and other fantasy, there is this creature called the Owlbear. And it is a bear's body with a owl's head, like beak and eyes and all. And so this creature just become is one of the like popular underground creatures of like the tabletop gaming scene. And so what we've done is we've developed, after several years, developed a plush that I'm actually happy with. I have a brand called the Baby Bestiary, which explores the cuteness of all these terrifying creatures in the fantasy genre. And so this plush was our first attempt at creating something cute in that vein. And so actually it's the audience has been a mix of gamers who just want a plush of their favorite horrifying creature, to parents who want them for their kids and everywhere in between.
And
There's a lot of
to kind of also just lay a bit of background there, this isn't your first campaign. Obviously, you've
no,
also
not at
created some
all.
other ones there.
This is my 15th campaign, question mark. So I have two Kickstarter accounts, one for Metalweave Games, myself, and then I have another that's dedicated for just the Baby Bestiary because it's sort of become its own thing. So I've sort of branched off with it.
When did you first get into launching these campaigns?
I first started in 2014, I believe. This was when Kickstarter was kind of just taking off. Well, not just taking off. It was like after the first major wave of popularity. And I actually got on a huge like Kickstarter backing spree.
That's
I think my
awesome.
first backed project was like marshmallows or something, flavored
Hmm.
marshmallows. And then so like I was doing publishing. So I was mostly doing tabletop game development and supplement publishing.
What do you mean by supplement publishing?
So things that are like compatible with fifth edition, compatible with Numenera, or just a generic tool for tabletop game for Dungeons and Dragons usage.
Got it. And when it comes to that, were you doing like a full-time job and like this was your hobby, or did you have a company before you went on Kickstarter?
No, this was definitely a hobby. There's a couple parts to it. Yes, I did it as a hobby. I still do it as a quote hobby. It's the most time consuming hobby of my life. But I mean, like, that's the fun in it. And so a lot of the money investments just go into create building the business, building the product. As a creator, I officially incorporated in 2017, but I was running off of a sole proprietorship federal income tax number
Yeah.
that was separate from my personal social security number almost a couple years after I started.
Okay, yeah, we don't have to get that nitty gritty. So when it comes to this, like, how would you describe yourself? Are you an artist? Are you a designer? Do you just like playing these games and such? How would you describe yourself?
I wear many hats. By day, I'm like a data analyst, systems analyst. So I work on business IT process workflows. And then on the tabletop side, I kind of do everything. I sort of saw myself as a designer, but more or less it becomes more like I hate how to say it, but it's the guy with ideas. But the thing is that I'm paying people or myself, to make them happen. So I learn layout, I learn Photoshop, I learn After Effects or InDesign and Premiere, like pretty much the entire Adobe suite to like make everything happen. So aside from doing it all myself, then I can just pay other people as well to continue enabling or producing.
And to do this, you were joking around about this, that hobby with a lot of work. What do you find is like the most rewarding part of doing these campaigns? I mean, you've done 15 of them so far. So obviously there's something there that you really enjoy or connects with you. What do you like most about it?
I think it's really like creating cool stuff. So a lot of it is driven by like passion or idea. So one project I had was, a Dark Souls setting, inspired setting. So like I went all out and, found artists, got writers and just produced a beautiful book about something I was vastly interested in at the time. The Book of Cute Monsters, that sort of has evolved into its own thing, but I only want to work in it in the capacity where I feel inspired to continue. So like we've done two books and I don't see value or inspiration to like keep digging into the creature mythologies to find these weird creatures that I can somehow make cute. Like I've sort of ran out of the idea train there, and so I don't want to explore it anymore because it just becomes more work and it's not. I don't feel like
It
it's
doesn't
worth
excite you.
trying.
Yeah.
Well, true. Yeah, it doesn't excite me as much, but also the amount of available creatures to try and find to make cute to build lore for is just the return on investment is a lot higher. And so it's easier to work when you're inspired.
When you talk about lore and like the fantasy side of this. I really see this being built into each of your campaigns. Like I'm looking at some of your older campaigns and just the artwork is phenomenal. And like it has this whole fantasy kind of feel to these. Is that very deliberate? Do you think about that?
Yeah. So actually recently I've been doing this whole like strategy, like listening to business talks and about like, oh, defining your corporate strategy and what do you do that makes you successful? Actually, it's a hard thing to think about because it's like, what do I do that's consistent between all of these? And I think after muddling on that has been a dedication to theme or product theme, and then the implementation of art to reinforce that theme. And usually how I do that for the most part is usually sole sourcing artists that I think fit that theme.
Mm.
So I'll either pick for most of the projects, I'm either picking like a single source of art, a single artist, and then they're illustrating the entire book. And I've done that for a couple books actually, where you'll like, find a cartoon artist or you'll find a creature artist, and then you'll just go have them go all out. And that's the other thing too, is if you're inspired, you pass off this idea to them, let them run off and be inspired and just give them like the things they need to keep going.
It's kind of like you're empowering them, right? To do their
Exactly.
work through your project almost.
Hmm.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, I hate writing and I'm a slow writer, so I'd rather inspire people to write more efficiently than I can.
Yeah, I can definitely imagine that. There's a lot of activities like that that I'm not the best person for the job, you know. When it comes to these campaigns, do you find there's spillover, like your audience kind of stays with you from project to project, or is it kind of like here and there?
Yeah, I do notice that there is a dedicated group of following that like I have garnered. There's people who will follow and engage with me on social media, and I definitely like see repeat names on Kickstarter comments and be like, "Hey, good to see you back." That's always, when conventions were a thing, having people come back and be like, "Yeah, I got all of these," it's like, "Oh, damn.
That's
You were
cool.
there since the beginning." Like, wow. But you do notice them, and there's usually like a handful. But I mean, if I had to go through the data, there's probably more than I think. But it's definitely a lower number. And like from this project, I guess once you hit like the snowball mode, you just have no idea who's backing at that point.
Yeah, I was looking at your community tab and like a good portion, it's 6,283 had already backed to Kickstarter, it looks like, and you had about 750 for new backers. So it looks like a huge majority are at least backers of Kickstarter projects in general. So that's why I
Yeah.
imagined your audience kind of spilled over a tiny bit there.
And part of that too was backer kit advertising. So a lot of that was pushing on that button. And there is a huge tabletop audience out there. And the hardest part about it is reaching them.
Definitely, definitely. So getting in front of them is important. So I want to get into that, but before we do, just while we're on like the layout side of things, you also have like some really good stretch goals, right? You've created with these different projects. What is your philosophy towards stretch goals? Because we've heard some people say, it's not worth doing. Other people are like, you should announce at the beginning. What's your like thought process towards stretch goals?
Stretch goals are valuable and it really depends on how you plan your project. So there's like, there's a couple different mentalities that people will take, as you've noted. I try to go down the path of the minimum viable product, but have it be scalable. And so with that, stretch goals matter a lot because, for a book of baby monsters, if I want to kickstart it for 5,000, every, couple thousand thereafter, we're adding another beast. So it makes it scalable. The more the book gets funded, the more creatures we get to put out. Everyone benefits from that. I think the biggest thing with that is to make sure everyone or mostly everyone benefits from that, whether it is everyone who's getting the base product or everyone who's getting the reward tier with the stretch goal. So
Mm.
usually that's like, this, like if you have a $10 base tier and then like a $20 base tier plus stretch goals, something like that, where it's like still obtainable and the value will continue to increase to drive more people to that goal or to that.
For those that are kind of newer to the Kickstarter launch process and everything, are stretch goals something that everyone gets? Is it like a new reward that's added? Can you just shed some light on kind of what it is?
So a stretch goal is once you're funded, you can Kickstarter creators have come up with a method to continue driving traffic and interest into the project. So once you've met your goal, what then? And so, in order to continue driving motivation and interest in the project, stretch goals are used to have people continue checking out the page, keep talking about it. And one of those things will be to say, if our goal is $10,000, once you fund, okay, what next? Is it at $20,000 or is it at $15,000? What can you offer, even if it's small, that the backers can get for hitting that stretch goal or for raising that much more extra funds? And it can actually be a huge trap as well, because I guess like 10 years ago, God, has it been 10 years? No, like 8 years ago, back in like 2014 when Kickstarters were booming and like all the media outlets were covering them, it was actually a bunch of companies fell into the trap of offering too many stretch goals or too many add-ons. You really need to keep your scope small. Like if you're going to add a physical item, how does that bundle into your existing, or shipping progress? So if you're adding items like we did for the Owlbear Plush, we're putting everything into a box. So only the people who are getting the box get all the things that are going into the box, because that makes our fulfillment easier. The warehouse is not handling 6 different items. They're only handling 2, the owlbear and the box.
Yeah, definitely. So there's a lot of thinking of the logistical component when you're adding a stretch goal, it seems. If you're worried about the fulfillment and shipping part of your Kickstarter campaign when it comes to getting out all those perks and rewards to your backers, rest assured I've put together a complete Kickstarter fulfillment and shipping checklist for you, and it's free. This is sponsored by the folks at Fulfillrite, and they thought that you should have this checklist as part of your arsenal going into a crowdfunding campaign. If you want to get instant access to this checklist and it's free, you can go to fulfillrite.com/checklist. Again, that is fulfillrite.com/checklist. Fulfillrite.com/checklist. Just go to that link and you can download it immediately.
Yes, very much so. And then like on the digital side, you still have to produce the item. You still have to pay artists, editors, designers, but the cost of fulfillment is free.
Got it. So now that you've done a bunch of these, and the Owlbear also was funded in 30 minutes, do you have any like formulas or best practices you go through when you're going to be launching a campaign? Like, do you do an announcement to your newsletter, or do you do anything on social media? Like, walk me through how you prepare for the launch?
So the biggest thing with Kickstarter, especially now, is get your project approved as soon as possible and use the launch feature. And the Kickstarter launch feature allows people to get notified on project launch. And once it hits a certain number, it'll start showing how many people are following the project or how many people will get notified on project launch. That's huge. And the goal there, so we had about, I believe, 1,100 followers, maybe 1,300 followers on the project before we launched.
1,300. That's a good number. Yeah.
Yeah. So like 1,000 is a solid number. If you can get obviously depending on how far in the kickstarting game you are, like I can see things like the Hellboy tabletop role playing game or the Lord of the Rings. When you look at it, they're like 5,000 or 8,000 followers, and it's like, holy crap, that thing's gonna blow up when it launches. And they did, but like it provides you an early idea of what your like first day is going to be. I haven't done the math on it yet because I haven't done that many projects where I need to look at the budget, because the main goal is to fund within the first 3 days just to continue steam with the project. And from there, like, yeah, you want to spend most of your time getting people to sign up before the launch of the project. Sure, your newsletter will help on launch and notifying beforehand. And some people can do the, drop it out of nowhere as a surprise. But more often than not, talking about your project before it launches is better because you'll reach more people who are interested in your project.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So basically, making sure you get approved so you can get that pre-launch button and sending people there can help because they'll get a notification. And the other thing is, if they don't yet have a Kickstarter account, that's a moment where they have to create their account, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're not having to create that right when you're going live and you're asking them to back you.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I think it's a really good one. When it comes to like, okay, we got the launch, you get funded, like what else do you usually do with these other projects to be able to promote it and market it? Are you having content you line up ahead of time? Is it more on the cuff? What's your approach like?
I probably should line up more content. Depends on the project. I do try to line up saying like, oh, I'll save these art pieces that I've commissioned, like these cute owlbear pictures or these prototype images, and talk about the story. And I'll try to have ideas or at least some art for a couple updates.
Hmm.
Because in the Kickstarter project, we can show off like, 7 or 5, 6 pieces of art. And then I want to have more art to show in the development or show layout, show concept art, and from that, like you want to have stuff to promote and to do updates. A good practice is to update every day or every other day. Obviously, when the later in the campaign you go, you don't have to do every day.
Yeah, yeah. But they can definitely keep people engaged and also just kind of keep people rooting, I think, for the success of the project there to a degree.
Yeah, and something that I've noticed, or something that I like to do, is I like once we hit stretch goals, I like to engage the community by having them vote for stuff. Like what creature do they want, or what add-on do they want, what kind of upgrade, and just that generates conversation. Which sometimes I don't know if the Kickstarter algorithm picks up. Some people say it does, but that engagement with the community, people coming in, writing comments and saying like, oh, I really want this, or this would be cute, or what ideas do you have for this?
Definitely.
Because
With your reward tiers, I was looking through some of your rewards, and it's so, surprising, I think, to a lot of people. Like, if you have a $35 tier, you obviously have a lot of backers there, but you also have tons of backers at these upper tiers, the $85 tier, the $60 tier. What are your thoughts on like pricing? Do you keep it just very simple and like very straightforward, or do you plan out your rewards a little bit?
so I definitely recommend for people to keep it simple. For the Owlbear plush, essentially was digital, one plush, two plush, one plush in box, two plushes in box. And I probably went a little overboard in that, but the backers were asking like, oh, I want two, and it's like, all right, I guess I got to create one for that. Um,
Yeah,
but at the same time, like I can plan for backer kit too. So like if people want to get 5 plushes, I don't want them to, drop all that money now. I can collect that later or manage that if they want 2 boxes and backer kit. So I kind of want to plan as basic as I can. So usually it'll be like physical product plus like rewards, and then maybe a deluxe product or something like special. So like, oh, if you want to get your logo or turn something of yours into a logo or turn a character of yours into the game, those special like $500 tiers and stuff like that. But those are specific to projects and should be extremely limited.
makes sense. Makes sense. So I have a couple questions for you, but before we get into that, when it comes to your experience as a creator, we've talked a bit about the reason why you like to do this, and we talked about what's kind of rewarding to you. Do you have any thoughts that you'd like to pass on to the creators in terms of advice of what you've learned over the years growing these different projects and really carving a name out for yourself, I think, in the industry?
It's complicated because at the same time, it's all like a rising tides approach. So, like, your first Kickstarter is not going to be the one that blows you out of the water or like makes you famous. My first Kickstarter, I was darn lucky I could raise 15K, and that was a hell of a campaign because it funded on like the day before it ended. But like the first one was not going to be a hit out of the park, and you will find a community of people that like what you're making. And you might need to evaluate how much you need to make that possible, but it never hurts to start small. Oh, and never upgrade a soft cover to a hard cover in a Kickstarter project.
What do you mean by that?
If you originally offer a soft cover book and then, or like product, and then upgrade it as like a stretch goal, it just makes things complicated.
Oh, yeah, I could imagine the cost behind that as well.
It's
Would
not too bad, but it definitely confuses a lot of people.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I could see that being a bit of a sticky situation there.
And then shipping would be the last thing. Shipping is always a pain in the ass, even more so now. And it doesn't hurt to close off shipping to countries, regions, because of how cost prohibitive it is for creating.
Do you use like a fulfillment company or you do it all in house?
I do it all. Well, so I do it all in house technically. Right now I have 3 warehouses I work with. Games Quest in the UK, which have just built out an expansion to the EU in Germany, but then you have to get a VAT ID. That's complicated Europe stuff. Then there's a warehouse in Australia, Aetherworks, and then I have TWE Inc., which is my USA warehouse.
And then they basically will ship out the product based on when the orders come in.
Yeah, so for me, so TWE or like my US warehouse has access to like my Shopify backend. So they get all the orders and they can process them out. If I get an order to Australia or Europe, I need to do those manually and like go into the system, mark it as shipped, go into their system and then put in the order. But the volume isn't there where I need to like worry about integrations and stuff yet.
So you seem very well versed on the creative side and the bringing the product to market side. You mentioned like wanting to learn a bit more about business and these kinds of things in leadership. What are you looking to grow with your company in those areas? Like, what are you on the lookout to try to your next leveling up experience?
So the goal that I'm working on now is not to remove myself from the process, but to reduce the amount of my involvement in the process. So that would be bringing on teams or team like contractor teams or people that I trust that can work on a contract basis or even on a retainer basis and have them work on projects, pitch projects, and sort of have create a pipeline where they can pitch, fund, and work projects through. That's one side of things. So I'm trying to remove myself from being the bottleneck of all my projects and get people who are, better at writing or better at layout or just specialized in that. And then I can continue focusing on business administration. And then, acquiring IPs would be my next goal, is to work specifically towards IP acquisition. So one of my projects is we got the Hyperlight Drifter license to make a tabletop RPG for the Hyperlight Drifter video game, which is going to release this year, actually. So that was a fun learning project. And so we're hoping to acquire another license after that. On the business side, I want to get more people working in-house creating product that don't involve my input or my direction.
Yeah, and I think that would be able to almost magnify the impact that you have. I mean, you've gotten this far by wearing so many different hats, right? And if you bring in more people and you have this pipeline, it can just magnify the impact I think you have on the niche.
Oh, yeah. And something like with the Drifter role-playing game is because I'm doing layout and design, like game design and writing. So I've written the whole thing. I've laid out the whole thing. And artists are so far the only people who've really contributed outside of that for the core book. It's, every delay is a delay because of me.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
I need to finish laying this out. I need to finish writing this. I can't just, go to someone else and be like, all right, is this all written? Is this all laid out? All right, let's get it the next step.
Yeah, definitely. You're a bit of a bottleneck there. And that's understandable. I think it's just the growth stage of the company. What are your thoughts on like the difference between Kickstarter and what you're doing with e-commerce on your Shopify store? Is it similar? Is it completely different? What are your thoughts?
I highly recommend getting into e-commerce, especially after your first or second Kickstarters, because, once you have product created, you have product to sell. You always want to order more product than what you're creating for a Kickstarter. If you're creating 1,000 books, order 2,000 if you can, or 1,500, because those will allow you. And obviously, the higher your Kickstarter goes, you can order more volume. So, like, we have 8,000 Owlbears we're producing.
That's a lot.
Yeah, I'm still trying to imagine the volume of that will consume. Like, I want to produce or see what it will take to produce, 18,000 or 15,000 owlbears. God, that volume. I
an
still
army.
can't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to imagine a shipping crate, stuff.
Like, where is this going?
Well, if it falls overboard, it will float.
So have inventory. Yeah, definitely.
So definitely have inventory, and that will allow you to sell. But you need a warehouse or Amazon. Amazon was a great place to start selling. So fulfillment by Amazon,
yeah.
FBA. I definitely started with them actually, and they move product when. But the thing to remember is when you're selling FBA, it's like you're selling to a distributor into distribution. You're losing 60% of it.
Yeah, which can be difficult, especially with margins and all that.
Yeah, exactly. So you have to be comfortable with that. And so I've moved most of my FBA all the way to fulfilled by merchant at this point. And so my warehouse handles all of that.
Where are most of your sales coming from? Is this from social media? Is this from your previous Kickstarters? Where are people discovering you when it comes to your Metal Weave Games store?
I'm not sure. To be honest, like, so a lot of things, like a lot of it, now that I have such a history of products, like you continue being active in the community, you continue contributing to discussions in the industry, whatever industry it is. For me, it's the tabletop role playing game industry. And so
Yeah,
there's a
yeah.
niche and community of creators that exist. And I've become quite embedded there and respected. And so people will either, talk about it. I'll see a post on Reddit about the baby bestiary and they'll be like, oh, I'll get a couple sales here and there. And, they kind of trickle in from wherever they find out about your products.
hmm So it's almost like the e-commerce is more of trickling in and like a slow growth. The Kickstarter is more of like a very intense 30-day period, right?
Oh, very much so. But after a while, like your e-commerce is going to grow steadily. It'll constantly grow steadily if you continue to be active, continue to create, continue to be involved.
Well
I
said.
think this year our sales have, I think we hit like, what is it, like 30K, 50K, 60K a year. I've been doing website migrations. So, couple things. WooCommerce, okay for starting a website, but once you start adding fulfillment locations, it becomes a pain in the ass and the stability goes down. So, like for me, I have digital and physical product. I have product that is in Europe, in US and Australia, and I have some product that are in Europe that's not in stock in the USA. So if I so that made things very complicated. And unfortunately, like I just went back to Shopify because even though it costs monthly, it is far more worth it. And they've actually built up some tools that didn't exist when I left them a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
Um,
more robust, a bit, it seems.
yeah, it's a bit more stable. It's a bit more robust. You have less reporting tools, but you can just do exports of your data, your order data to get them.
Makes a lot of sense. Well, we're coming to the end of the interview here. I have one final question, but before we do that, where can people go to learn more about some of your other products and also your most recent Kickstarter?
The best place to go would be our website, Metal Weave Games. So that'd be metalweavegames.com or metalweave.games. And to clarify, that's metal, METAL space WEAVE. That was based off of an old jewelry making hobby of mine. So that's kind of remained consistently through.
And my final question for you is for someone who's in your shoes and like they just are basically starting their first or maybe their second project, what's a final thing that you would leave with them? It could be a word of encouragement or inspiration. It could be a final tip. It could be something you wish you knew. Anything along those lines. We can end the show on that note.
There's so many things to tell people, especially when they're getting into kickstarting and creating. It doesn't have to be perfect, and you will learn and grow. My first products were crap layouts. I went back to them and I still cringe. So like you will learn and grow as you create, and finishing your creations is more important than making them perfect.
Love it. Thank you for coming on, man. I appreciate all of your advice and tips, and good luck with your next campaign.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified Podcast. How you doing, man? Hope you're having a good week. Drinking some really great coffee right now, taking some notes. And, I love to be a student. It's one of my favorite things is to learn new stuff and to really digest it and like understand it and pull it apart and change the world, right? Like that's at the end of the day, what we all love doing, I think, is not only being able to like master new skills, but also to use that to empower ourselves to do more, to be more, to grow more, to put out cooler products, to impact the world, to get people using your stuff, whether that's a tabletop game or something that's a little bit more niche, like a plush toy or a physical product, a good or something like that, right? We like to have people experience the stuff that we've created. It kind of fulfills, I think, this need for meaning and impact and legacy and like all those bigger words, I think, really play into this. But to not get away from the point too much, the number one thing that's like holding you back, I feel, and also holding me back when it comes to, growing in our career is not necessarily that we don't have the willpower. I think you have the willpower, totally, 100%. I think that you're searching out the right information, right, with this show or with the YouTube channel that I have or with the books or the blog. Like, you're already doing that stuff. The thing that's holding you back is access to the right people, the right service providers, the right resources, the right tools, the right know-how. If you could suddenly download all of the trade secrets in an industry into your head, you could go out there and you could act on this information knowledge. You can have rapid success. It's one of the reasons why so many of the companies out there hide their trade secrets. Apple doesn't want you to know how the iPhone's made, right? All these companies out there don't want you to know the algorithm behind Google or the secret proprietary algorithm behind how Kickstarter campaigns are funded, right? And why they're popular. They don't want you to know that stuff. But I have a bit of a different belief around that. And I think that education is empowering. I think that it helps people. And I think that people almost deserve to understand those kinds of things. And if they don't have them, it can lead to less success instead of them trying to just take it and steal it and run or something like that. So it's always been my belief to lead with great teaching and education and proven concepts that I've tested out and verified that work when it comes to crowdfunding. And that's kind of where I started with my career, but also it's been something I've been doing for my entire career in the way of building communities and sharing access to training and having courses, right? And having downloadable cheat sheets, like all that kind of stuff. And that's what I put all of that, I combined all of that into my new mastermind. And the mastermind is designed not only to give you access to all that stuff, but also to me, right? To give you access to me, an insiders club, where I'm doing weekly workshops on different topics on crowdfunding and sharing with you things like how do you blow past your goal quickly when it comes to Kickstarter? How does the algorithm even work, right? With the platform itself, how do you smash your goal and do even better than that? What are some of the stuff you don't know about when it comes to the tricks of the trade that you can apply and that are current, up-to-date, and cutting edge that I'm continuing to study every single day in terms of what works, right? So this is a lot of cool stuff. If you want to get access to this and you really want to join us, we already have a bunch of people that are in this community and they're loving it. They're saying incredible stuff, getting tons of great testimonials. I got to set aside some time to just put this all into a video, honestly. Yeah, if you want to join us, you can go to crowdcrux.com/mastermind. That is crowdcrux.com/mastermind, crowdcrux.com/mastermind. Absolutely no obligation to join. It's just there for really the hardcore people in my fan base who do want to make an impact, do want to get results, and want to discover some of the unique ways that we figured out in order to get your campaign funded that we don't talk about and that I don't talk about publicly usually, just because there's a lot of proprietary knowledge when it comes to this. So that being said, I hope that you enjoy it and find it useful. Tons of great downloads. I think my last workshop last Friday had 10 downloads or something like that. It was crazy, So I'm always doing cool stuff and new stuff that I'm bringing to the table. Hope you enjoy it. Again, crowdcrux.com/mastermind. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast episode. Leave me a rating and review. Let me know what you think. Hopefully you liked it. Give me a thumbs up on YouTube if you're listening to this there. But my name is Sal, and I'll see you next time.